My girlfriend, the ultra-rich heiress Serafina Vance, ditched me yet again to keep her precious childhood golden boy company. After returning home, she realized I had completely vanished without a trace. The only thing she found was a contract, a literal receipt, proving her father paid me to play the role of her devoted boyfriend. However, she still refused to believe that I, a guy who had chased her like a premium simp for 5 whole years, would actually bear to leave. She genuinely thought I was just throwing a tantrum, eating vinegar over her childhood crush because I cared too much about her. So, she planned to just wait for me to come back and casually coax me like a stray dog. But in her wildest dreams, she never imagined that our next meeting would be 4 entire years later. By then, I had already become a rising star in the business world, standing proudly with the fiancé I met abroad. Serafina had been in a coma for 3 days, and I stayed by her side, not even undressing to sleep, for those exact 3 days. Every 2 hours, I used a cotton swab dipped in water to carefully and delicately moisten her lips. Talk about 5-star service. On the morning of the 4th day, Serafina finally fluttered her eyes open. I knelt by her bed, eyes red, blaming myself like an absolute martyr. Serafina, you're finally awake. In the kitchen, her favorite 6-dish, 1 soup meal was kept warm. The room was constantly playing the soft, light music she adored. Even though she hadn't been conscious for days, the moment she opened her eyes, everything was arranged exactly to her liking. Serafina gave a faint nod. I helped her sit up slowly, leaning against the headboard, then took the bowl of porridge from the maid. I blew on it to cool it down while bringing the spoon right to her lips, constantly asking if she felt any better. Serafina reached out for her phone with one hand while casually brushing me off with the other. Much better. When the porridge was halfway gone, Serafina frowned and pushed my hand away. I quickly grabbed a tissue from the side to wipe the soup stains from the corner of her mouth. Taking advantage of her sitting up, I went to the wardrobe to fetch her absolute favorite lotus pink silk pajamas. To Serafina, all of this was nothing but her natural-born right. She kept scrolling through her phone, looking panicky as if she were terrified of missing some life-altering message. As I crouched down beside her to help her put on her slippers, I accidentally caught a glimpse of the name peeking out from her screen. Sterling! I hurriedly turned around, pretending I hadn't seen a single thing. But in my heart, I was calculating. The time is just about right thinking of this. I went to the bathroom, pulled out my phone, and called Father Vance. The moment the call connected, the rich, mellow tone unique to a middle-aged tycoon drifted out from the speaker. Lysander, breaking up right after graduation? After all these years, do you truly have zero feelings for Serafina? It sounded like a sigh, yet also an interrogation. The sheer pressure of a man in power made it hard to breathe. I didn't answer. I just looked through the glass window at a little bird using a branch as a springboard to leap into the sky. After a long pause, I spoke softly. Thank you for taking care of me these past few years. But you should also understand, this was originally just a transaction. Talking about feelings now is honestly a bit ridiculous. Besides, you got yourself an outstanding daughter. Serafina waited for the man she wanted to wait for, and I received the compensation I rightfully earned. All 3 parties are overwhelmingly happy. This is the best possible outcome. On the other end of the line, Uncle Vance let out a heavy sigh, his words carrying a hint of regret. Actually, I always thought highly of you. It's just a pity. He changed the subject. That girl Serafina is too rebellious. You've definitely been wronged these past few years. Good thing Sterling is back, so I won't have to worry about her anymore. As for you, I promised back then that as long as you kept her safe and steady through university, you could pick any top-tier college domestically or abroad. Now, can you tell me where you want to go? I stared at the tree branch outside, swaying in the air from momentum, and zoned out for a split second. In my sophomore year of high school, Serafina crashed into my world, and my life basically hit the pause button. After all these years, I had almost forgotten my original dreams. My heart felt completely hollow. I nodded. I'll send it to you shortly. Thank you in advance, Uncle Vance. The call ended, and the branch outside completely stilled. Was this a foreshadowing of my future life? My family was dirt poor, but my saving grace was my own sheer excellence. During my sophomore year, the school administration brought me before Mr. Vance. They asked if I was willing to be the young Mrs.'s study companion. I had to sync with the young Mrs.'s schedule, cook, clean, and take care of the young Mrs.'s diet, daily life, and physical and mental well-being. Anyone with a single ounce of backbone would have resolutely chosen to refuse, but I didn't. I nodded, because I was just too damn desperate for money. Desperate to the point where if I shook my head, I wouldn't even know where my next meal was coming from. But if you asked me to give up the educational opportunity I fought tooth and nail for, how could I ever be willing to do that? Father Vance looked at my clothes, washed until they were faded but spotlessly clean, and was very satisfied with my neither humble nor arrogant attitude. After a moment of hesitation, he finally said, "Our Serafina has a terrible temper. Whether you can stay by her side will depend entirely on your own skills." Father Vance told me there was another boy around Serafina. They were considered childhood sweethearts of equal social standing, but Sterling was a maverick young man, overly wild and rebellious. Serafina grew up following him around, becoming a notorious little delinquent in their social circle. Father Vance absolutely despised this fact, but to avoid damaging his relationship with his daughter, he didn't dare say a word. However, he absolutely could not accept Serafina dropping out of school to follow Sterling abroad to form some delusional band and chase a so-called dream. His daughter could not be trapped by silly teenage romance, nor could she become a stain on his life's resume. So, Father Vance decided to find her a study companion who was top tier in both ability and looks to drag her out of that messy relationship. And I, for the sake of cash, dropped my so-called dignity and signed a contract with Father Vance. For 5 years, I was to help Serafina get over that relationship, guide her to get into a good university, and make the Vance family look glorious. To cater to Serafina's rebellious personality, I deliberately faked being bullied, brushed past her, and dramatically fainted right at her feet. After that, using the excuse of repaying her kindness, I hovered around her like an obsessed demon. My relentless persistence made Serafina's attitude toward me shift from outright disgust to treating me like invisible air. From then on, the entire school knew that Serafina had a wildly obsessed, premium simp glued to her side. Even so, we remained like two parallel lines that would never intersect. Until the night Sterling went abroad. Serafina squatted by the road at the airport, dragging her suitcase, crying her eyes out for ages. She violently threw her violin towards the sky. From the background files Father Vance provided, I knew she loved the violin, not the guitar. I knew exactly how important this violin was to her. It was a relic left by her late mother. Father Vance had thrown a massive fit at home, threatening that if she dared walk out the door, he would disown her. But she still took the most precious thing to her, dead set on leaving with Sterling, only to arrive at the boarding gate and see the boy she had secretly loved since the dawn of her puberty holding someone else's hand. Just as the violin was about to be crushed into absolute powder by passing cars, I charged out without a second of hesitation, shielding it tightly in my arms. Serafina's face turned ghostly pale. With trembling lips, she interrogated me. "Are you out of your mind? It's just a trashy violin, but it's yours!" My forehead was covered in dirt and stray hair, but my eyes still sparkled as I looked at her. "I said it's yours, so it must be protected at all costs." The moonlight hit our faces, dragging our shadows together. Later, Serafina finally snapped out of her daze, looked at me, and blurted out, "Isander, let's be together." Of course, I knew exactly how much actual love was mixed into that sentence when she said it, but I simply didn't care. As long as I completed the agreement with Father Vance, I would have a bright and shiny future. All of this was worth it. The next day, Serafina showed up in a long dress, having cut her hair short, strutting in delicate high heels in front of everyone. And I took her to tutoring, lived in the library, and buried her in exercise books, forcefully dragging her rock-bottom grades right into a top 985 university. We spent ages debating the decay modes of entangled particles. On the day the college entrance exam results came out, I left an invitation letter for an astronomical observatory, which I had registered for in advance, on the table, hoping to give all our questions an answer. Besides that, there were flowers, wine, and gifts. It was the maximum level of romance I could afford. But that night, I waited until the candles burned out, and Serafina never showed up. I don't know when Sterling added me on social media, but I saw Serafina, who was supposed to be with me, popping up in his feed. At that time, Sterling had just been dumped by his girlfriend, and he was slowly realizing that his dream was a bottomless pit with no future. But the Ito-Sterling family was wealthy. He had the capital to make mistakes. It was also during that time that Serafina's contact with him became increasingly frequent. She figured that since he was returning to school, she would secretly pick up the guitar again in the dead of night to practice tunes she wasn't familiar with. She would sneakily paint makeup she didn't even like in front of the mirror, then wipe it off over and over again. The Sterling family's business was declining, and Sterling finally caved to the pressure, choosing to come back and inherit the family empire. And it was on that exact day, just so the man she loved could see her the second he got off the plane, Serafina got into an accident on the way to the airport. I guarded her bedside without sleep or rest, yet the very first thing she did upon waking up was scroll through her phone, terrified of missing a single text from Sterling. In that moment, I faced the contract once again. It seemed like doing this made my heart hurt a little less. Sterling was back. Serafina had become a famous violinist domestically. Father Vance had his pride, and my time to exit stage left had arrived. Life was returning to its normal track. This was the optimal outcome we had predicted from the very start. "Are you done yet?" Seeing I hadn't come out of the bathroom, Serafina frowned slightly and asked, only to hear the rushing sound of water. I snapped back to reality, turned off the faucet, and rearranged my emotions in front of the mirror. Then I replied cheerfully, "Done." The night was thick, but I had zero desire to sleep. I flipped out of bed, went to the study, grabbed a finance book, and sat by the windowsill, reading by the moonlight for the entire night. The next morning, seeing the cold spot next to her on the bed, Serafina frowned instinctively as she walked past the study. "I really hate this vibe that reeks of money. Why would you suddenly read this kind of book? It's full of nothing but scheming." She lowered her eyes, picked up the book next to me, and flipped through it absent-mindedly. "Just looking around." Actually, it wasn't just looking around. My next move was going abroad to dive deep into finance. Right now, I was just reviewing in advance. Serafina didn't think much of it. She put the book down, grabbed her phone, and turned to leave, but her gaze kept darting back to the screen. I no longer had the energy to guess who she was waiting for. Her heart rate was practically syncing with her phone's notifications. It seemed that since Sterling returned, they had a million new things to talk about. Lately, the usually aloof and noble Serafina was smiling in a much more grounded, down-to-earth way. I quietly watched her text while taking the milk from the maid. Suddenly, I said flatly, "Serafina, let's break up." Since promising Father Vance 5 years ago, I had been preparing for this exact day. My voice was totally calm, sounding like the most casual small talk ever. The maid shot me a weird look then, seeing Serafina had no reaction, quickly lowered her head and scurried away. Serafina's entire soul was currently glued to Sterling. She brushed off what I just said. I don't really care. It was just a paper contract anyway. Over the years, I had long gotten used to her dismissive attitude towards me. But since it was a transaction, to prevent her from throwing a fit and backtracking later, I still pulled out the pre-prepared agreement, flipped to the signature page, and slid it in front of her. Seeing this, Serafina finally managed to tear her eyes away from her phone, glance at my face, hastily skimmed the agreement, and quickly scribbled her name. Then she immediately went back to smiling brightly at her screen. I packed away the agreement, about to turn and leave, but couldn't resist asking one last question. "You're not even going to read it?" Serafina replied impatiently. "No need, I trust you." She abandoned her half-eaten sandwich and rushed out the door. Looking at her overly eager back, I suddenly said seriously, "Serafina, slow down, don't rush." I also wanted to add, "What's yours will always wait for you, but what isn't yours, no matter how hard you run, you'll never catch it." Seeing me act so out of character, Serafina paused, confusion written on her face, until the message on her phone popped up again. Only then did she grab her bag and scramble outside, throwing a sentence over her shoulder. "Don't worry about the studio stuff. When I have time, I'll come with you to pick a location." Hearing her words, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. The studio location had been finalized ages ago. It was literally under construction right now. That was her dream. How could I dare delay it? Sadly, ever since Sterling showed up, her affairs kept getting postponed over and over until even she herself forgot about them. But none of that mattered now. I just needed to wrap up all these chores before I left. That way, Serafina could go do what she loved with the person she loved and finish that unfulfilled dream. Thinking of this, I shook my head at Serafina and said, "It's fine. There's no rush for that." At noon, I drove to the studio to check the renovation progress, then headed straight to my buddy's bar. "I'm leaving." Hearing this, Callahan looked blank for a second, then his eyes went wide as he stared at me in absolute disbelief. "Leaving? Where to?" In high school, Lysander was a bona fide genius despite his poor background. In his sophomore year, he started dating the rich heiress, and not only guided her studies every day but even went to learn arts, a subject he had zero interest in, just for her. Who knows how many people mocked him? A guy who could have been the master of his own destiny, choosing to be a pathetic simp instead. "So, you've finally figured it out?" Callahan paused. "Wait a minute. Are you saying you're leaving Serafina? You're no longer going to be the Vance family's live-in son-in-law?" Callahan's heart was a mix of emotions. Aside from being genuinely happy for me, he felt all these years I spent were a massive waste. But as if remembering something, a trace of worry flashed across his brow as he asked, "You're not just having a lover's spat and acting out of spite, right? Don't tell me you two will make up in 2 days." My fingers brushed past the glass bottles on the bar, making a crisp, pleasant clinking sound. "Nope. She and I were nothing but a transaction. I wanted money, she wanted reputation. Now the transaction is simply over." Callahan froze, then it dawned on him. "I knew it! Why else would you suddenly get so close to the Vance family's eldest miss? No matter how she treated you, you willingly stayed by her side, even pulling out all the stops to make her study. You guys were never from the same world anyway. Breaking up is for the best." He punched my shoulder encouragingly, and I laughed, punching him back. We both raised our glasses. A toast to the past, and a toast to the future. After returning from Callahan's, I started taking inventory of what to pack. Even though I lived here for 5 years, because I planned to leave from the very start, my belongings were pitifully few. Aside from a few clothes and accessories Serafina bought for me in the beginning, just so I wouldn't embarrass her in public, I seemingly had nothing. I folded these clothes piece by piece and stuffed them all into a single suitcase. As for the little gifts I had made by hand over the years, I gently wiped the dust off them, then casually tossed them into another box. As the eldest miss of the Vance family, what good things hadn't she seen? I actually hoped she would take a second look at these little crafts. Truly hilarious. I piled the boxes in the corner. Just as I breathed a sigh of relief, a gasp came from downstairs. As soon as I reached the stairs, I saw a man in a red tracksuit walk through the door, flop onto the sofa, lean back, and start puffing away on a cigarette. It was none other than Serafina's only twin brother, Thaddeus. Thaddeus glanced up at me, standing on the high ground, raised an eyebrow slightly, then frowned. "Do you have any manners? A guest is here and you don't even know to come down and serve." I couldn't be bothered and turned to walk away. The smug smile on Thaddeus's face vanished instantly. He aggressively grabbed a teacup from the table and smashed it violently in my direction. The cup crashed onto the carpet, splashing tea everywhere. Lysander! Ever since I got together with Serafina, I accommodated them at every turn, flattering them endlessly. I had never shown them a cold face like today. Instantly, a nameless rage flared up in Thaddeus's heart. "If your eyes are useless, donate them." Can't you see we have a guest? Get down here and pour tea. I rolled my eyes, making zero effort to hide my absolute disgust. I knew Thaddeus despised me. He thought I was as pathetic as a dog groveling in front of Serafina. So over the years, he frequently popped over to this villa just to pick fights. But every single time, I tolerated it. However, our contract was officially terminated now. I was leaving any second. Why should I keep putting up with this BS? Seeing my attitude, Thaddeus shook violently with anger, like a powder keg about to explode. The man next to him quickly grabbed his arm. All right, Thaddeus, you just can't ever fix this rotten temper of yours. Thaddeus's rage was forcefully halted. I finally shifted my gaze to the man beside him. He had a high nose bridge, deep-set eyes, a clean face, and slightly curly golden-brown short hair. Right now, he was looking at me with a half-smile playing on his lips. My subconscious told me this was Sterling. The Ito family had fallen from grace. I thought he'd be stressed out of his mind by company drama, unable to find a moment of peace. I didn't expect him to still act so wildly carefree, truly worthy of being the man Serafina was so hopelessly obsessed with. He held onto the explosive Thaddeus and laughed wryly. No matter what, Lysander is Serafina's boyfriend, your future official brother-in-law. Don't talk nonsense. He's just a dog to Serafina. How could our Vance family ever take a low-class man like him as a son-in-law? Thaddeus thought. He can't even grasp Serafina's heart. Does he think he can manipulate the old man at home? A broke, pathetic loser dreaming of climbing the high branches, but Thaddeus didn't want to explain too much. He just glared at me fiercely and said, "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and get dinner ready. Didn't Serafina tell you we're heading out early tomorrow morning? Did you prep all the gear we need?" I took one look at the two of them resuming their video games on the couch, ignored them completely, and went straight back to my room. This made Thaddeus so furious he slammed his phone onto the floor, cursing, "Tui, what a piece of trash!" Serafina's food, clothing, housing, and transportation over the years were all personally arranged by me, but that didn't mean anyone in the Vance family could order me around like a servant. After all that noise, the maids ended up serving a delicious dinner, and the mini-war was temporarily paused. After dinner, Thaddeus was ready to start trouble again. Seeing Serafina return from her lessons, his eyes drifted to my face, then to Sterling, who was sitting quietly on the side. He suddenly spoke in a weird, sarcastic tone. "Sterling, I told you back then you shouldn't have left. Look at this now. Any random nobody thinks they can take a crap on your head." He turned his body, staring dead at Sterling, and said, "Why don't you come stay at my place instead? We bros can party way harder." Saying this, he side-eyed Serafina from the corner of his eye. Sure enough, Serafina panicked. She shot up from her seat and looked at me. "Sterling doesn't have many friends in the country right now. Take good care of him." It was a direct order, not a request. I didn't say a word. After a long silence, Sterling suddenly stood up, looking incredibly conflicted. "Maybe we should just leave. After all, you two are getting married soon. It's too awkward for Thaddeus and me to live here. At worst, I'll just wake up early tomorrow and come pick you up." Hearing this, Serafina immediately shook her head. No need. Who knows when Lysander and I are even getting married? Besides, he wouldn't get mad over something like this. I just watched silently. After a long while, I finally nodded. "Yeah, marriage is still a long way off. You guys can just stay here with peace of mind." Of course I wouldn't get mad, because I had no right to. For all these years, I was nothing but an accessory. To make Sterling feel totally at home, Serafina immediately ordered me to personally clean a room for him, right next to her own room. Seeing this, Thaddeus smiled smugly, playing simp for 5 years, and the moment Sterling comes back, you still have to stand aside. He deliberately bumped his shoulder into me and barked, "What are you still doing here? Go pack our stuff. We're heading out first thing tomorrow." This villa had several maids, but Serafina's belongings were always prepared by me alone, simply because she had sensitive skin and a fragile constitution. I couldn't trust anyone else. Even things she might not use, I would prepare one by one, terrified of any accidents. Ironically, Thaddeus, who tagged along, had enjoyed plenty of this convenience. Unfortunately, right now, I had zero clue where they were going and absolutely no way to start packing. I stared blankly at Serafina. She looked incredibly awkward. Just as she was about to speak, Sterling piped up next to her, sounding pathetic. "Thaddeus, don't talk to him like that. We're outsiders, after all. It's not right to make Lysander pack for us." Saying that, he picked up his phone, acting like he was about to check for a convenience store nearby. But Serafina quickly grabbed him from behind. "This is a villa district, not downtown. What are you thinking?" With that, she turned to me, her brows unnaturally knitted together. "We're going river rafting tomorrow. Go prepare for it." I nodded in understanding, but I pointed to the storage room at the end of the hall, looking utterly troubled. "This is too sudden. We don't have gear for a fourth person at home." Actually, it wasn't impossible to figure something out, but since I was leaving anyway, I didn't want to bust my ass in the middle of the night for some guy I didn't even know, so I deliberately used time as an excuse. The atmosphere froze instantly. In the past, I handled all these matters single-handedly. Now, the group stood silently in the living room, watching Serafina hesitate to speak. Thaddeus beat her to the punch. "You didn't actually think we'd bring you along, did you?" He smugly counted on his fingers. "There's me, my girlfriend, Serafina, and Sterling." At this point, Serafina looked deeply apologetic. "Lysander, do you want to go? If you do, tomorrow we can." Hearing this, Thaddeus frowned, cutting in unhappily. Absolutely not. There are only a few seats. I'm definitely not squeezing in with anyone. He pointed a finger, ready to rant some more when Sterling quickly pulled him back. Thad, don't be like that. He glanced at Seraphina standing nearby and said softly, Seraphina, I've been abroad for so many years. It's all thanks to Lysander taking care of you. I remember you've had a weak immune system since we were kids, always getting sick. Just in case, maybe we should bring him along. Since he put it like that, and Seraphina was terrified of dragging them down and making Sterling unhappy, she nodded gently. Okay, let's bring him along then. In the end, without even asking the person involved, they finalized the decision. Because of my addition, the vacancy for a chauffeur was perfectly filled. For the entire 4-hour drive, I drove in the front while they chatted joyously in the back. Having not seen each other for so long, their memories traced all the way back to kindergarten. Seraphina and Thaddeus were twins, but with completely opposite personalities. Thaddeus and Sterling laughed boisterously while Seraphina chimed in from the back. Even though Clarisse, Thaddeus's girlfriend, wasn't part of those memories, their attitude towards her was entirely different from how they treated me. At the funny parts, all 4 of them burst into uproarious laughter. Mid-law, as if remembering something, Sterling suddenly looked at me, the driver. Lysander, you haven't been with Seraphina for that long. You probably never experienced her pure and innocent phase. Huh? I nodded. Couldn't care less. Just focused on driving. It really hasn't been that long. Exactly from the day you left to the day you came back. I filled in every single blank space Seraphina ever had. Seraphina glanced at my dead serious face. As if remembering something, she fell into a momentary silence. When we arrived at the rest stop, I used smoking as an excuse to stand far away from them. The smoke hit my face, stinging my eyes until they turned red. Through the overlapping crowds, watching them laugh and mess around in the distance, I let out a heavy sigh. Clearly, the ones who had supposedly survived a 5-year dark age were Sterling and Seraphina, yet I was the one covered in absolute exhaustion. Luckily, it would all be over soon. I swiped on my phone, checking the studio's renovation progress via security cameras, silently cheering myself on. By the time I got back to the car, they had already bought the tickets. We brought fewer things. The scenic area should sell whatever else we need. Make sure we have the bug spray. Sterling attracts mosquitoes way too easily, Seraphina said, taking inventory of the trunk while asking for everyone's input. As she spoke, she didn't forget to tuck the little bottle into her own bag. Even after all these years, her subconscious still prioritized taking perfect care of Sterling. Lysander, here your ticket. I looked at her outstretched hand, a flash of surprise in my eyes. 5 years. This was the very first time Seraphina personally did something considering my feelings. I took the ticket from her hand and muttered a thanks. Throughout this outing, Seraphina spent the entire time catering to Sterling beside her. I experienced absolutely zero joy from the trip. Halfway down the river, the channel suddenly narrowed and the current turned aggressive. Thankfully, everyone was wearing life jackets, but right at that moment, a couple in the raft ahead of us started a massive argument. The two kept pulling and yanking, fighting over the oars, getting more and more violent. The tourists around them all desperately tried to dodge, which completely screwed over the people closest to them. Unfortunately, that was us. The woman had a fiery temper and refused to let go, shockingly throwing the oar straight into the river when the man wasn't looking. Seeing this, the man lunged to grab it. Their raft lost its balance, wobbling wildly, crashing into a hidden reef and catching a massive wave. We ended up getting bumped and knocked around like pinballs. Screams echoed everywhere. Seraphina subconsciously pulled Sterling towards her. I couldn't dodge in time. I watched helplessly as the jagged edge of a massive rock zoomed right toward my face. In a split second, the world spun. I felt a rush of hot liquid gushing from my forehead. I bit my lip hard, forcing myself to stay calm, but the pain left me speechless. Lysander! Seeing this, Seraphina quickly let go of Sterling's hand, staring at my forehead in absolute panic. Are you okay? I'll take you to the hospital right now. She stared wide-eyed, nervously pulling out her phone to dial emergency services. Just then, a low gasp came from beside her. Sterling! Watch out! Hearing this, Seraphina snapped her head up and looked at Sterling, just in time to see him brush past another rock. A muffled groan followed. A tiny, faint red scratch appeared on Sterling's snow-white skin. After witnessing such a heart-stopping scene, obviously, one had to be careful. Sterling glanced at his arm and frowned slightly. Minor issue. You should take Lysander to the hospital first. He bit his lip, his voice trembling ever so slightly. What do you mean, minor issue? Your hands are for creating music. We absolutely cannot allow a single accident. Thad, call the scenic area staff. Hurry! Facing Sterling, Seraphina lost all the composure she had just shown, crying massive panicked tears. Thaddeus glared viciously at the people in front of them, even throwing a warning before leaving. If anything happens to Sterling, the Vance family won't let you off the hook. Even the coldest heart would be moved. Sterling, eyes red, turned to look at Seraphina. He opened his mouth and finally said, Thank you, Seraphina. Shouldn't you check on Lysander first? His injury is way worse than mine. But how could Seraphina care about any of that? She shoved Sterling into the ambulance, hastily slammed the doors shut, completely forgetting that Thaddeus hadn't even gotten in yet. You've been pampered since childhood. When have you ever suffered like this? Watching the ambulance vanish from my sight, I snapped back to reality. Holding my head to stop the bleeding, I endured the agonizing pain and limped back to the car. Look at that. Nobody can replace Sterling's position in Serafina's heart. Only someone like him is worthy of being our Vance family's son-in-law. Even though Thaddeus hadn't made it onto the ambulance, he stood there with his arms crossed, smiling smugly. Some people really shouldn't dream impossible dreams. If I were you, I would have packed my bags and screwed off a long time ago. I ignored his mockery, just taking one grueling step after another. The scenic area staff, seeing that the ambulance they called had sped off, rushed over sympathetically with a first aid kit to patch me up. Once the medicine was applied and the bleeding stopped, I lay quietly on the sofa in the office. A long time later, the piercing pain finally subsided. I took off my blood-stained shirt, grabbed a random t-shirt from outside to put on, and shakily got into the car, carefully driving the mountain roads toward the hospital. The doctor pursed his lips, applying medication while instructing me not to let the wound touch water. His eyes were full of deep, unmistakably severe reproach. How did it get this bad before you came in? It's practically infected. This scenic area is wildly irresponsible. I was already numb from the pain. I just stared blankly out the window and nodded. While paying the bill, I passed the nurse's station. Two young nurses were chatting. Who exactly were those two VIPs today? Acting like absolute royalty. A grown man gets a tiny scrape and acts like the sky is falling, right? My husband wouldn't even squeak over a scratch like that. Are pretty boys all this fragile nowadays? Don't talk nonsense. Didn't you see that the woman was spinning around him like a top? She was literally crying from panic. The laughter continued, but my footsteps moved further and further away. Spinning around him like a top, a bitter smile crept onto my lips. I had spent these past few years spinning entirely around Serafina, and what did I get in the end? Absolutely nothing. After paying the fee, grabbing the meds, and listening to the doctor's orders, I turned, thanked them, and left. Stepping out of the hospital doors and breathing in the fresh air, I finally calmed down. I pulled out my phone again to check the studio's progress, only for a different message to pop up. Senior, Professor Ouyang is holding a seminar at the academy these few days. Rare opportunity. Come quick! It was an invitation from a junior student. Professor Ouyang was a reigning authority in finance, and tickets to his lectures were basically impossible to get. After college, I followed Serafina and chose an art field I had zero interest in. Now, I finally had the chance to choose again. I went to the library, bought all the necessary materials, and instead of returning to the Vance Villa, I headed straight to University B in the neighboring city. University B was the pinnacle of finance institutions in the country. It was my only dream back in the day. I just never imagined I'd actually walk through its doors. Even with the Vance family's help, it had always remained an untouchable fantasy. But now, standing under the sycamore trees on the campus, I took a deep breath. All the grievances of the past few years evaporated into thin air. I walked all the way to the school auditorium, smelling the air of absolute freedom, and couldn't help but sigh. This is amazing. Because of my passion for it, I had never truly abandoned this major over the years. The knowledge synced perfectly with the professor's eloquent speech, forming a flawless blueprint in my mind. No noise, no responsibilities. The pen scratched endlessly against the paper. For 3 whole days, I drowned myself in this perfection. It wasn't until the 3-day seminar concluded that I finally had the mind to check my phone. For the past few days, my phone had practically blown up. The screen was flooded with missed calls and texts from Serafina, every single one asking where I was. Normally, I was just an optional NPC in her life. I always placed everything right in front of her to choose from, so I guessed she was just feeling slightly inconvenienced these past few days without me around. Just as I was spacing out, the phone rang again. My hand naturally swiped to answer. An ear-piercing roar blasted through the speaker. It was Thaddeus. Lysander, where the hell have you been playing dead these past few days? Roll your ass back here right now. Don't think pulling this crap will get Serafina's attention. She couldn't care less about your cheap little tricks. After cursing me out, the call was brutally hung up. I frowned. This family's arrogant attitude really was a shared genetic trait. I wanted to ask what was going on, but looking at the mountain of missed calls, I didn't even know which number to start with. Filled with confusion, I went to the studio. As soon as I stepped out of the car, the workers swarmed me, complaining bitterly. Mr. G, we seriously can't do this job anymore. You better find someone else. It's just a damn water pool. No matter how many times we fix it, Miss Vance is never satisfied. Always almost there. Almost there. Where the hell is it lacking? And the equipment for the audio room? That is entirely out of our scope. I know nothing about it, but she forced me to go buy it, and then said this is wrong. That is wrong. You deal with this yourself. Hearing this, it all made sense. In the past, whatever Serafina wanted to do, I handled every detail flawlessly. Now without me, she was completely lost. After racking her brains, she sought help from Thaddeus and Sterling, who were equally clueless. I nodded and properly pacified the workers. This was the very last thing I could do for Serafina. I stepped into the studio, only to see Serafina sitting disheveled in a chair, while Thaddeus and Sterling were blindly pointing fingers at the backyard. Even covered in dust, sitting there, she was as beautiful as a painting. Seeing me walk in, Serafina shot up, the deep furrows on her forehead instantly smoothing out. Lysander. She opened her mouth, struggling for half a day just to spit out my name, packed with infinite grievance. Where have you been these past few days? I couldn't find you anywhere." Her voice was hoarse, practically on the verge of crying. I took the blueprints from the foreman and replied, "Went to University B." Serafina's brow dipped slightly. "Why go there all of a sudden?" I raised my eyes, gave her a look, wanting to say it wasn't sudden at all. I had always loved it. If not for the contract with Father Vance, I would have fought tooth and nail to get in there. But in the end, I just pursed my lips and left it at "had some business." Seeing I didn't want to talk about it, Serafina seemed to remember something. She followed me to the edge of the pool, looking incredibly apologetic about the river rafting. I didn't mean it. But you know, Sterling was born with a silver spoon. He's never suffered injuries like that. We grew up together, so my subconscious reaction was to save him. "I'm sorry. Why didn't you tell me you were hurt too? I could have taken you to the hospital with us." Somehow, this whole mess was twisted into being my fault. A bitter smile pulled at the corner of my mouth. Good thing I didn't care about this crap anymore. I just wanted to wrap everything up here and leave in peace. But Thaddeus, standing on the side, had no intention of letting me off the hook so easily. Just as I put away my pen, ready to go outside and communicate with the foreman, a sharp scolding pierced my ears. "Lysander." I turned around to see Thaddeus storming over, fuming with rage. "Do you have zero self-awareness as a servant? You took every penny of your paycheck, but when it's time to work, you're a ghost." I rolled my eyes, snapping back coldly, healing my injuries. Everyone froze. They finally noticed the thick gauze wrapped around my head. Right. With that amount of blood gushing out back then, did I really need to verbally announce I was injured for them to notice? I didn't care about their reactions, turned around and left. On the third day, while I was reading in my room, Serafina suddenly barged in, cuddling into my arms like a normal, clingy girlfriend. I was confused, but still let her wrap her arms around my neck. She took a deep breath against the crook of my neck, murmuring in a nasally voice, "Just wanted to hug you." First time feeling this dependent. I said nothing, just tightened my arms slightly, only to feel something cold slip onto my wrist. A Patek Philippe watch materialized there. Limited edition. Astronomical price tag. I looked up, staring at Serafina in confusion. An unnatural smile spread across her face as she awkwardly coughed. "Was shopping with the girls. Saw this watch suited you, so I bought it. Just consider it compensation for all your hard work at the studio lately." Her eyes darted toward the door as she whispered, "Also, sorry about what happened before." She didn't specify which thing she was apologizing for, and I didn't bother asking. We just sat there quietly leaning against each other, enjoying this incredibly rare moment of warmth. After being together for so many years, this was the first time Serafina realized my kindness wasn't just a basic factory setting. Passing by the watch store, she remembered my past praises for the brand and subconsciously ordered the staff to box up the most expensive one. This was the first time she had ever given me a gift, yet it was delivered in such a manner. I looked at the cold metallic gleam on the watch's contour, thinking of the handmade crafts I poured my heart into, now sitting in the corner of the study. A bitter taste filled my mouth. We simply weren't from the same universe. Right then, Thaddeus's loud, obnoxious voice echoed from downstairs. "See, I told you that brat cares about you the most. I barely got the news and she already prepped a gift." He excitedly picked up the packaging box on the coffee table and yelled up the stairs, "Serafina, is this the promotion gift you got for Sterling? So thoughtful. This style perfectly fits a business elite." As he spoke, he started tearing into the packaging, calling Sterling over to try it on, his voice dripping with pure envy. But the moment he opened the box, he realized something was wrong and charged upstairs to interrogate. The footsteps grew louder. Serafina looked trapped. I hastily took the watch off and shoved it back into her hand. Seeing the watch in her grip, Thaddeus breathed a sigh of relief. "I knew it. Why would Serafina ever give this to you? Look how well it suits Sterling." One sentence, and the watch's rightful owner was violently reassigned. Luckily, I didn't care, but Serafina's deeply apologetic gaze landed on my face. For some reason, seeing me so utterly unbothered, she couldn't feel an ounce of happiness. A week later, it was the studio's grand opening. My mission was finally complete. I could leave. As I was packing up my things, double-checking for any missed items, Serafina sent a maid over with an invitation. Along with it came a tailored suit. Looking at the bespoke suit, I suddenly wanted to laugh. After all these years of companionship, I had already bought my departure ticket, yet Serafina was asking me to attend her life's crowning moment as her male escort. My instinct was to refuse, but then I received a text from Father Vance. "I'll wait for you at the studio." In the end, I changed into the suit that perfectly matched Serafina's dress and headed toward the studio. I pushed open the acoustic transmission doors. Neon tubes slithered through the grid, outlining an abstract musical staff. The floor was covered with a smart carpet that sensed step frequency. Every footfall triggered ripples of different pitches, blending cyberpunk and classical flawlessly. Serafina and Sterling wouldn't argue over this either. Sure enough, they were thrilled with the design. In the crowd not far away, Sterling was surrounded by a group of fellow musicians, showering him in flattery. Everyone looked at him with sheer envy. "Serafina's love for you is the real deal. You bolted back then, and after so many years, her life is still filled with traces of you. I'm tired of saying how jealous I am. Tell me about it. That watch on your wrist is an anniversary custom edition. Less than 10 globally. I heard Miss Vance paid triple just to outbid someone. Didn't expect it was for you. I remember you loved this brand back in school. Can't believe after all these years, she still remembers. Remember when she lied to her dad and sold her mom's relic just to buy you a gift? We lived in the same neighborhood. You should have seen how badly old man Vance beat her. Thinking about it still hurts. Sterling, you're never gonna find another woman who loves you as much as Serafina. Just surrender to her already. Yeah, if I were you, I'd lock her down at home no matter what. A wave of laughter erupted. I just stood quietly in the dark shadows nearby, watching. So Serafina is capable of loving someone so recklessly, without a single bottom line? Lysander. My eyes were hollow, fingers tapping aimlessly against the wall. Father Vance's voice sounded behind me. I turned and instinctively bowed slightly. Uncle Vance. He nodded slightly, glancing at Sterling in the distance, a fine wrinkle forming between his brows. What, regrets? Miss Vance belongs on a much higher stage. She's not someone like me could ever dream of having. Father Vance was very satisfied with my self-awareness. Lysander was excellent, but that was it, just excellent. Aside from that, he had absolutely nothing. He didn't exactly favor Sterling as a son-in-law, but the Ito family was a juicy piece of meat. Sometimes he couldn't help but sigh. If Sterling's background and Lysander's abilities were swapped, he probably wouldn't be in such a dilemma. He sighed, suppressing the regret in his heart, and handed me the pre-prepared documents. Lysander, since you've made your choice, study hard. I look forward to the day you succeed. It's still early before the semester starts. You can take some time to adapt. I've also put a sum of money in the envelope. Consider it my gratitude for guiding such an outstanding daughter. He narrowed his eyes, looking at his daughter speaking eloquently on center stage in her elegant gown, immensely satisfied. Looking at the envelope in my hands, I let out a massive sigh of relief. The thought that once this banquet ended, I could leave this place, shred 5 years of shackles, and finally do what I wanted to do. It made me uncontrollably excited. I pretended to calmly stash the documents into my bag, then raised a glass of wine to Father Vance. A toast to you, Uncle. Downing the liquid, I looked at him calmly. Uncle Vance, for Serafina's sake, I have one last request. Please do not tell her that I'm leaving. You know how she is? I shrugged, not finishing the sentence. I didn't want to attract any more drama. Father Vance naturally understood his daughter's paranoid tendencies. He was just slightly surprised. You didn't tell her you were leaving? It's on second thought. What was there to say? How would he say it? Or tell her that this was all just a business transaction between me and her father, just to satisfy his control freak tendencies and mold her into the perfect businesswoman? Thinking of the fallout from telling the truth, Father Vance couldn't help but shiver, nodding in understanding. Anyway, Sterling was back. Serafina's mind was no longer on me. Maybe by the time she noticed, she would have already gotten used to my absence. I shook my head. No need to say much. She probably won't care anyway. Holding my wine glass, I looked at the noble woman on stage, a smirk forming on my lips. So the woman I gave my all for turned out to be this incredible. What are you guys talking about? Suddenly, a crisp, female voice came from the side. I snapped back to reality, turning my head straight into Serafina's gaze. My breath hitched. I opened my mouth to explain but didn't know where to start. Instead, it was Father Vance who looked at her, eyes full of praise. Baby girl, you were absolutely spectacular today. Receiving her father's approval, Serafina blushed, lowered her head, and completely threw her previous question out the window. A few seconds later, she remembered her objective and suddenly looked up at me. Let's go! It's time for our performance. Father Vance patted my shoulder, and I finally realized they had scheduled a segment for me. Let's go! Serafina reached out, linking her arm with mine, smiling sweetly and gently. But I shook my head, pointing towards Sterling. I just composed the music. I don't like being critiqued in front of people. Go find Sterling to accompany you. A flash of shock crossed Serafina's eyes. Why is he actively pushing himself toward another man? But you built this studio from the ground up. I frowned. Of course I knew this studio was my blood, sweat, and tears. But every brick and wire here belonged to the Vance family. Moreover, she used to drop me like a hot potato every time she had to choose between us. Why the hesitation now? Checking the time, my flight was boarding soon. I didn't want to drag this out with her. I patted her shoulder encouragingly. Go on, I'll always be your solid backup. Seeing my smile didn't look fake and remembering my usually reserved personality, she bought it. Then, lifting her skirt, she turned and walked towards Sterling. Seeing her invite him, Sterling couldn't help but puff up his chest, thinking, did Serafina build this entire studio just for me? Before he could think further, he took her hand and walked step by step toward the center of the stage. The melodious violin echoed. Their eyes met, as if making some solemn vow. Halfway through the party, many people used excuses to leave. Only a few of their close inner circle buddies stayed behind. Instantly, the conversation became unrestrained and vulgar. No one cared that Serafina was technically still my girlfriend. Sterling watched her blush at the crowd's teasing, pulling her tightly into his arms, his face radiating absolute triumph. I, on the other hand, couldn't care less. I chugged the last drop of wine, put down the glass, grabbed my things, and turned to leave. I was running out of time, but my silence, in their eyes, looked like a pathetic, fleeing retreat. Thaddeus saw it, wrapped his arm around Clarice's waist, and swaggered over like the ultimate trust fund douchebag. As I walked out of the restroom, a crowd had already blocked my path. Lysander, bet you didn't see this coming, huh? The studio you busted your ass to build turned out to be a wedding dress my sister made for Sterling. How's it feel playing the tailor? He glanced behind him, and the crowd erupted in mocking laughter. Don't you think Serafina and Sterling are a match made in heaven? He slapped a hand on my shoulder, pointing through the glass at the laughing group outside. Honestly, I had no idea why Thaddeus hated me so much. For 5 years, he constantly provoked and targeted me at every turn. Seeing my confused expression, Thaddeus looked incredibly smug. I told you a long time ago, Sterling and Serafina are soulmates, not something a desperate beggar like you could ever compare to. I rolled my eyes, too lazy to engage. He's already graduated college, and he's still using these middle school bully tactics? Who knew my indifference would ignite his fury even more? A useless nerd like you dreaming of marrying into the Vance family? Keep dreaming! Even if Sterling hadn't come back, don't think you'd ever get a single penny from us. It's already come to this, and you still can't see your place? How shameless can you get? They chimed in one by one, making it sound like my mere existence was a disgrace to humanity. Amid the shoving, someone pushed too hard. I stumbled back a couple of steps to steady myself. The mop behind me crashed to the floor with a massive bang. Suddenly, someone screamed. A towering stack of beer crates in the restroom collapsed, smashing directly onto me. The smell of malt and yellow liquid spread everywhere. The red blood mixing into the mess was terrifying to look at. Everyone snapped their heads around, mouths wide open, forgetting to breathe. Serafina's pupils dilated in pure horror. She instantly shoved Sterling aside and sprinted toward me. Her voice trembled with sheer terror as she pressed against my bleeding wound, screaming frantically for an ambulance. Who did this? Her eyes were brimming with rage, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Everyone was terrified, staring at Thaddeus, their eyes darting around as they desperately brainstormed a believable excuse. Serafina, are you okay? Did you get hurt? Right then, Sterling rushed over, grabbing Serafina's hands to inspect her up and down. Then he frowned and said, Spotty got hurt when he went outside earlier. He won't stop bleeding. He's so defensive right now that even the family vet can't get close. I have to go back immediately. Hearing the name, Spotty Serafina's expression finally softened. That was the little dog they rescued together during a trip in their freshman year. It was considered pretty old by now. Serafina looked at me bleeding on the floor, hesitating. Sterling immediately played the understanding, gentle guy. It's okay. Spotty isn't that fragile, even though you're probably the person he wants to see the most right now. But regardless of whether you go or not, you're his one and only mom. Just 2 sentences, and he perfectly hoisted Serafina onto the moral high ground. How could she be so heartless to an old dog? She looked at me on the ground. Lysander, Spotty is hurt. I'll go check on him and be right back. All the strength drained from my body. I bit my lip and nodded weakly. Go. Spotty grew up with you two. He holds your entire youth's memories. You should go see him. Serafina never expected me to be so understanding. A wave of unexplainable relief washed over her face. She shot up. The ambulance will be here any second. I'll have my assistant come stay with you. I shook my head. I have things to do. No need to trouble anyone. It's just a minor scratch. I can handle it myself. Given the amount of blood, probably only I dared to call this a minor scratch. But Serafina couldn't care less. Even though she felt Lysander was acting weird today, Spotty's injury took absolute priority in her mind. Lysander's probably just too tired lately. She reasoned as she got into the car. I'll give him a long vacation after this. Watching Serafina leave without a shred of hesitation, a sarcastic smile curled my lips. This only made Thaddeus even more arrogant. He had originally been terrified Serafina would settle the score with him. Looks like Serafina's care for you is nothing but cheap talk. You're literally worse than a stray dog. Lysander, if I were you, I'd just go die. I ignored them. The ambulance took me away. After quickly patching up the wound, I impatiently discharged myself. I only had an hour and a half left. I was terrified of missing my flight. Returning to the villa, I grabbed the suitcase I had packed early on and rushed toward the garage. Uncle Zhang, take me to the airport. I hopped into the passenger seat, only to see Thaddeus running over, also needing a car. Seeing me, Thaddeus looked confused. I thought you were half dead. Serafina even told me to go guard you at the hospital. He scanned me up and down. Looks like you're fine. I'm going out to drink with the bros. My face was expressionless. I checked my watch, calculating the odds of getting a cab to the airport. 0. Right then, Thaddeus noticed the suitcase in my hand. Just as he opened his mouth to ask where I was going, I cut him off. Take me to the airport one last time and you'll never have to see my face again. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind leaking your little secrets. Thaddeus stiffened his neck, ready to bark back, but I coldly spat out 2 words, Kongyue, a location of his secret. Uncle Zhang, to the airport! Thaddeus sat back down, furiously barking the order. Lysander better pray he never falls into my hands again. On the way, he still couldn't suppress his curiosity. Where the hell are you going? I ignored him. He pressed on. Did Serafina dump you? Doesn't make sense. She just told me to go watch you at the hospital. Annoyed beyond belief, after a long silence, I finally said, Your sister loves Sterling. Now that he's back, I'm giving up my seat. Isn't that great? Hearing this, Thaddeus's eyes widened. My fairy-like sister got dumped by this loser? He wanted to say more, but I didn't give him the chance. Before the car even fully stopped, I frantically jumped out. Thanks. and goodbye forever. Saying that, I waved, dragged my suitcase, and vanished into the terminal. A day later, Serafina finally dragged her exhausted body back to the villa. Out of habit, she called for Lysander to help her unpack. After several moments of dead silence, Serafina frowned slightly. "Where's Mr. G?" A maid hurried in from outside, took her bag, and guided her upstairs. Mr. G went out. Maid kept her head down, too afraid to look her in the eye, terrified of doing something wrong and pissing off the eldest miss. Serafina gave a casual and didn't ask further. Lately, for some unknown reason, Lysander had become obsessed with finance. He was either burying his nose in books or running around attending lectures. He was slowly reeking of that money stench, which these self-proclaimed artists despised the most as being too commercial. She didn't think she did anything wrong this time. Even though she felt slightly uneasy, she wasn't worried. In fact, she felt entirely justified. After all, she had told Lysander before leaving, and despite being this exhausted, she still came back to see him first. What more could he possibly be unsatisfied with? Thinking about this massive favor she had bestowed upon him, Serafina grew impatient. She walked to the second floor, looked at the empty study, and an inexplicable surge of irritation hit her. Read, read, read. If I tear up his books, let's see what else he can read. She stormed over to the desk and violently tore the documents on it into shreds. Every rip was an outlet for her anger. When the pieces hit the floor, she went to stomp on them, but a word caught her eye. Contract! What contract? She frantically gathered the shredded pieces from the floor, trying to piece them back together. It documented every single detail of her and Lysander's time together over the years. Every event, every word. It was all strangely familiar yet completely alien. Until the very last line, all debts cleared. Serafina's face turned ghostly pale instantly. The warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by a bottomless, freezing chill. What the hell is going on? Her fingertip traced the signature at the bottom of the page. It was her own. This meant both the beginning and the end of this relationship had been fully authorized by her, but she had zero recollection of it. Her memories had been heavily filtered. She couldn't remember signing this agreement no matter how hard she tried. Find Lysander and bring him to me. How dare he dump me? Serafina kicked the chair next to her with a ferocious swing. The violent motion made the maid nearby jump out of her skin. Suddenly, as if remembering something, she froze mid-air. It was that day her brows drooped. The day after she woke up from the coma, she had indeed signed a document. But at that time, her mind was entirely glued to Sterling. She had zero capacity to pay attention to anything else. That must have been what I signed. She gritted her teeth in pure hatred, fiercely ripping the just-pieced-together document back into shreds. Lysander said they were cleared. How dare he? He was the one who provoked her back then, doing whatever it took, even risking his life, just to make her smile. How could he say they were cleared just like that? Sterling's face flashed in her mind. Is it because I've been too close to Sterling lately, and Lysander got mad? I knew it. He still cares about me so much. Is this just normal couple jealousy? Maybe our relationship does need to change. Being so high and mighty all the time won't lead to a happy marriage. Fine, this time I'll properly coax him. Serafina never truly considered that Lysander had genuinely left. After all, this was the man who loved her so much he gave up his own future to study art, a subject he hated. For the next few days, Serafina was busy preparing an apology gift for Lysander. It wasn't until she came back from the studio, reeking of alcohol and collapsing onto the sofa, that the entire villa suddenly plunged into darkness. The maids ran around like headless chickens. Serafina jolted awake, screaming, "What's going on? Where's Lysander? Tell him to check the breaker." The maids instantly froze, looking at her, stammering, Mr. G hasn't been back in a very long time." The scolding on the tip of Serafina's tongue died instantly. How could she have forgotten? By the time the butler fixed the circuit, half an hour had passed. The next day, Serafina ordered the butler to hire someone to inspect the villa's wiring. When Thaddeus heard this, he was stunned. Didn't Lysander handle everything in that house? Why is Serafina doing it herself? Does that mean since the day he left, he never came back? Goodbye forever. Was he telling the truth? Recalling his absolute resolve that day, Thaddeus looked up at Serafina, who had just hung up the phone and was tuning her violin. He heard they signed some sort of contract, but Serafina never took it seriously. He curled his lips in disdain. That guy sure knows how to calculate. Breaking up and signing an agreement just so our family can't claw back our assets. He glanced at Sterling, who was tuning his guitar in the next room. It seemed he still didn't know what happened. Good riddance that Lysander is gone. Serafina waited for so many years, and Sterling hangs out with us every day. Looks like wedding bells are finally ringing for the Vance family. Thinking of this, he dragged his stool right in front of Serafina's face. Serafina, have you decided when you're marrying Sterling? Your big bro will prep a massive gift for you. Serafina frowned deeply, snapping her head up to glare at him. What the hell are you talking about? My boyfriend is Lysander. Why would I marry Sterling? Lysander's already gone, and you guys didn't have much real feeling anyway. We finally got Sterling back. If you don't marry him, who are you going to marry? Thaddeus said it, like it was the most obvious fact in the universe. But Serafina's voice trembled with sheer panic. How do you know Lysander isn't coming back? Seeing the murderous glare in her eyes, Thaddeus braced himself and explained. He said it himself. Goodbye forever. I thought he was just trying to scare me, but seeing him gone for so long, I finally realized he wasn't just throwing a tantrum. Hearing Thaddeus's words, Seraphina's face turned icy and dark. This situation wasn't as simple as she thought. Lysander wasn't throwing a tantrum. He actually left. The violin in her hand slipped, hitting the floor with a sharp crack. Lysander loved me so much, how could he even want to break up? Was I too nice to him lately, making him arrogant? He's just a broke college grad with no money and no power. What future does he have without me? Seraphina grabbed her phone and dialed his number without hesitation. The cold, mechanical female voice repeatedly informed her that this was not a dream. Miss Vance, no need to call. We've tried before but couldn't get through. That's why we contacted you. Seraphina froze, looking up at the newcomer. It was the foreman who had been renovating their studio. Lysander was only in charge of the renovation. The follow-up payments were handled by dedicated staff. It was completely normal they couldn't find him. As for why nobody could reach him on the phone, the fury on Seraphina's face deepened. She shot up, dialing while storming out the door. He used to take classes at University B. Maybe he was still there. But he wasn't. Half an hour later, the admin from University B called Miss Vance. Mr. G did indeed audit classes here before, but he hasn't shown up in a long time. Even the student who brought him in hasn't seen him. He spoke cautiously, terrified of triggering Seraphina's wrath. But the other end of the line was dead silent. He wasn't at the school. His hometown was dirt poor. Back then, even selling his house couldn't save his terminally ill mother. He literally had nowhere to go. Seraphina couldn't figure it out. She smashed her fist against the steering wheel. The car screeched out of the underground garage, heading straight for Callahan's house. Because of his inferiority complex, Lysander hated socializing. Callahan was his one and only good friend. Seeing the frantic woman at his door, Callahan just looked up casually. He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and tossed it to her. To what do I owe the honor of Miss Vance's presence? Since childhood, when had Seraphina ever been treated like this? But she had no energy to care. She just sat on the sofa, staring dead at him. Callahan, do you know where Lysander went? Ever since losing Lysander's premium 24/7 simp service, her life had fallen into complete chaos. But in front of Callahan, she couldn't bring herself to admit it. Callahan stared at her with a half smile, reading her struggle in a single second. Without Lysander serving her like a grandson, the princess is starting to get uncomfortable. He fully raised both hands in support of Lysander's decision. It was about time she learned her lesson. Fortunately, Lysander and the Vance family only had a contract. If they actually got married, Lysander probably wouldn't have been able to straighten his spine for the rest of his life. Callahan popped open a cola, took a huge swig, and turned on the TV. He stuck to you like glue 24/7. Whenever us bros tried to hang out, he never had time. Now you come asking me where he is? Isn't that hilarious? Back in the day, she was the one who forced Lysander to cut ties with them, calling people who only cared about making money vulgar, saying they didn't understand art, only survival. Back then, Lysander chose Seraphina. Callahan didn't understand, but he respected it. Over the years, he was the only one who still kept in touch with Lysander. Facing Callahan's icy sarcasm, Seraphina didn't back down. She had no other options. All these years, Lysander revolved entirely around her. Did he have friends, hobbies, places to go? She had never bothered to notice. But Callahan stuck to his script. I don't know where he is. If you don't have any other business, please leave. In the end, she was basically shoved out the door by Callahan. The door slammed shut. Seraphina stood outside, dumbfounded. She had always assumed Lysander's parting words were just an extreme reaction to Sterling's return, a desperate attempt to teach her a lesson and grab her attention. But now, when she actually tried to find him, she realized that man hadn't left a single trace behind. He genuinely wanted to leave. But why? She was the one controlling this relationship. Who gave Lysander the right to make the final decision? Returning home, the maids were already waiting in the living room holding gowns and jewelry. My girl, come try this on. Let's see if Dad's taste is as good as your mom's. Father Vance beamed when he saw her walk in, waving her over. Now that you've graduated and your career is on track, the Ito family and I agreed to have you two get engaged first. Hearing this, Seraphina shot up, staring at him in sheer disbelief. My boyfriend is Lysander. Why the hell would I marry Sterling? Father Vance looked confused. But, didn't you guys already break up? Seraphina opened her mouth slightly, frozen for a long time. Even my dad knows we broke up, so why was I kept in the dark? Father Vance looked at his daughter's blank face. He thought Lysander just hadn't mentioned the 5-year agreement, but he didn't expect he hadn't even brought up the breakup. But he clearly remembered Lysander handing him a contract back then to prevent future disputes, and it clearly had Seraphina's signature on it. Of course, Seraphina knew exactly what her dad was talking about. Thinking of this, she violently slammed her bag onto the floor, eyes practically shooting sparks. Lysander shamelessly barged into my life back then. What right does he have to just up and leave now? If she remembered correctly, that agreement was signed the day after she woke up from the hospital. So, he was planning to leave the very day Sterling came back. So eager to run away, she didn't want to argue with her dad, glancing at the gown in the maid's hands, demanding an explanation. Speaking of this, Father Vance got excited. Weren't you dying to marry Sterling back in the day? Now that the boy is back, tonight's business summit is also a chance for the elders of both families to meet officially. Not going! Serafina instantly shattered her father's fantasy. In the past, they thought Sterling was just a useless playboy. They forbade her from being with him no matter what. Later, they decided Lysander was capable, but so what? He had no family background. Time passed, and the only thing that changed was their decision. Serafina was utterly sick of being controlled like this. I haven't agreed to break up with Lysander yet. I make the decisions about this. After years of being together, she knew exactly how dependent she was on him. She couldn't even imagine how exhausting her life would be if someone else took his place. Moreover, Lysander pampered and spoiled her to the absolute limit. How could he just walk away? There must be another reason. As for Sterling, he was just a foggy teenage dream. Thinking about it for years, finally seeing him again, it was natural her heart fluttered. But imagining Sterling sitting in the position that rightfully belonged to Lysander, she involuntarily shuddered. She couldn't do it. How could Father Vance not understand his daughter's heart? Seeing the reluctance in her eyes, he sighed and told her to follow him to the study. When his assistant pulled an employment contract out of the safe, Serafina froze. Because at the very bottom of that contract, the signature was Lysander. Between his two children, he was most satisfied with Serafina. He didn't want her drowning in romantic delusions forever. So he told the brutal truth. Back then, you were throwing your life away for that idle boy. Your grades were trash, and you even wanted to drop out and go abroad with him, so you could finish your education properly and stop making stupid mistakes. I came up with this plan. I hired someone to drag you back onto the right track and get you into a good college. That way your mother in heaven wouldn't blame me. At that time, Lysander was the school's top genius, yet forced to drop out by sheer poverty. To let him study without worries, and for Serafina's future, Father Vance made this deal with him. Although Lysander's mother ultimately passed away, thanks to Serafina, she received the best possible treatment, helping Lysander survive the darkest phase of his life. Actually, once Lysander helped her move on and got her into a good university, the contract was technically fulfilled. But using the excuse of not being at ease, Lysander dragged the contract out year after year. Anyone could see he had genuinely fallen for Serafina. If Sterling never came back, Father Vance probably would have accepted Lysander as their live-in son-in-law. But Sterling did come back, and he was still tangled up with Serafina. He valued the Ito family's wealth, but also recognized Lysander's talent. Choosing between the two, he was just as conflicted as Serafina. Unfortunately, before he could make up his mind, Lysander had already come to him and announced his exit. Father Vance told Serafina everything, but she couldn't process a single word. She stared at the contract in her hands, her eyes turning bloodshot. So, all his tolerance over the years was entirely because of a contract? He went to extreme lengths to treat her well, but there wasn't a single drop of love in it? Sterling's return merely gave him the perfect excuse to leave. But how could a person with zero emotion in his heart look at me with eyes so full of passion? He clearly looked at me like I was his entire world. How could that not be love? Serafina's complicated gaze fell onto the paper, but her mind was filled with the flawless scorecard Lysander had handed her over the years. It all made sense now. No wonder she could be miserably depressed over Sterling, yet he still stayed by her side. No wonder he chose his most hated major just to accompany her. No wonder he never left, no matter how much she humiliated him. Everyone thought Lysander was desperately, madly in love with her. But now she was being told it was all just a business transaction. The last shred of illusion in Serafina's heart shattered. All the strength left her body. She walked back up the stairs to her room step by step, buried herself in the blankets and sobbed uncontrollably. Seeing his daughter like this, Father Vance felt terrible. Serafina's mother died early. She was the apple of his eye, yet she was suffering so much in her love life. One Sterling, one Lysander. Much later, he carried a tray of food upstairs. Serafina, even without love, we still have to live. Eat a little something. Don't starve yourself. Father Vance lowered his voice, trying to coax her gently. Hearing her dad's voice outside the door, Serafina's breath caught. She took a deep breath, stood up, reorganized herself, opened the door, and looked at him with desperate hope. Lysander came to you when he left. You definitely know where he is, right? Father Vance looked at his daughter, unable to bear seeing her so devastated, but thinking about the uncontrollable chaos that would ensue if he revealed Lysander's whereabouts. He looked extremely conflicted. Serafina, living our own lives well is better than anything else. Hearing this, the light completely died in Serafina's eyes. So Lysander's determination to leave was truly that absolute. Seeing his daughter wronged, Father Vance secretly wished he could storm over, drag Lysander back and make him apologize. But ever since Lysander got to the other side, he immediately cut off all contact. He had called the butler at the arranged accommodation over there. Lysander never showed up, so Father Vance was just as helplessly anxious. Meanwhile, downstairs, Thaddeus was secretly thrilled knowing Lysander wasn't coming back. The family members each harbored their own thoughts. Just as everyone was waiting for time to heal the wounds, Sterling suddenly got into massive trouble. Thaddeus and Serafina rushed to the old Ito family mansion, only to see several hulking bodyguards blocking the door. The man leading them had his lips pressed into a thin line, his brows heavy with an unresolvable fury. Serafina frowned, immediately recognizing the woman sitting on the ground as the girl Sterling had taken abroad 5 years ago. As time passed, the wild, carefree aura on her face had vanished. She looked so frail a gust of wind could blow her over. In her confusion, Thaddeus yanked her aside. "Seraphina, come here." He deliberately lowered his voice, but the crowd still looked over at them, especially the woman in the center who stared daggers at her, the hatred in her eyes so thick it could practically tear Seraphina apart. Seraphina walked up to Sterling, her face full of concern.
"What's going on?"
Sterling didn't answer, but the leading man spoke up. "I am Evangeline's brother, Dorian." He wasn't an unreasonable guy, but seeing the Ito family acting all gloomy and victimized ignited a furious rage inside him. 5 years ago, you, Sterling, tricked my sister into going abroad with you. How much money did she burn to support you? We aren't even asking the Ito family to pay it back. To chase your delusional dream, you forced her into abortion after abortion. Now that she's ruined like this, you tell her you're getting married and to stop contacting you. I'm here representing my parents to demand an explanation from the Ito family. What do you plan to do about my sister, Evangeline? With that, Dorian turned to look at Seraphina, sneering coldly. Speaking of which, for them to end up like this after so many years, Miss Vance's promiscuity and utter shamelessness definitely deserve a lot of credit. Seraphina's face flushed crimson with rage. She was a high society lady. This was the first time someone pointed at her nose and cursed her like this. All these years, Lysander was her official boyfriend. Whatever she did, he was by her side. Even when she contacted Sterling, it was right in front of Lysander's face. How could they accuse her like this? Evangeline glared at her with pure poison. Back then, she was rebellious and genuinely in love when she abandoned everything to follow Sterling abroad. She wholeheartedly wanted to build a life with him, trying every way to pave a path for his career. But she never imagined that it was during that exact time Sterling started accumulating random, weird little trinkets. He would secretly smile like an idiot when alone and smell like a perfume that definitely wasn't hers. At first, she blamed herself, wondering if she put too much pressure on him, until she accidentally discovered that Sterling had been secretly meeting Seraphina all along. Their interactions were even more frequent than 5 years ago. They fought and screamed. Sterling swore over and over that he had zero feelings left. If they were going to be together, they would have done it ages ago. But just a few days ago, he brutally dumped her out of nowhere. It wasn't until her brother hunted him down that she found out he was about to get engaged to Seraphina. Then what the hell was all her waiting for? Thinking of this, Evangeline's stare turned even more venomous. Suddenly, she shot up, seemingly fueled by an unknown strength, charged past Thaddeus, violently shoved Seraphina to the ground, pinned her down, and viciously slapped her across the face several times. Instantly, the Ito mansion entrance turned into pure chaos. Dorian, however, just raised an eyebrow, his gaze icy. "Some noble lady, just a cheap homewrecker. You already have a fiancé, yet you're still tangled up with someone else's man." These words made the pale Seraphina turn completely red. "We're just friends." Hearing this, Sterling snapped his head up, staring at Seraphina from behind. What did she mean? In just 3 hours, it was supposed to be their engagement banquet. From childhood until now, Sterling knew perfectly well how much Seraphina loved him, but he wasn't willing to hang himself on just one tree. When he found out she liked him, he tried countless ways to kill the little girl's fantasy, but nothing worked. To shake her off, and for freedom, he chose to go abroad. Perhaps fearing loneliness in a foreign country, Sterling brought along Evangeline, who loved him just as fiercely. The Vi family wasn't the Vance family. Daughters of the Bai family were meant to be played with and tossed aside. But man proposes, God disposes. Over the years, the Bai family shockingly rose to power, gaining the capital to go toe-to-toe with the Ito family. But marry Evangeline? He still shook his head. Coincidentally, at that exact time, his grandfather mentioned an alliance with the Vance family. Sterling agreed without a second thought. He was done playing around. He began distancing himself from Evangeline while his relationship with Seraphina grew increasingly ambiguous. He just didn't expect the Bai family to investigate him, laying all his whereabouts out on the table. When all the coincidences linked together, that so-called friendship became incredibly impure. Later, using the excuse of lack of trust, he directly dumped Evangeline. He never had an ounce of responsibility anyway. After saying that, he immediately played the turtle hiding in its shell, tossing all the mess to the Ito elders to clean up while he continued enjoying his carefree life. But this time, he miscalculated. The Bai siblings came knocking at his door. The Ito family couldn't protect him. Out of desperation, he called Thaddeus. He didn't expect Seraphina to tag along. Seeing the chaotic scene, Sterling instantly regretted it. Once Evangeline had vented enough, Dorian finally looked at Sterling. "Well, have you thought it through?" Seraphina subconsciously shielded Sterling, but was blocked by Evangeline's bodyguards. "We won't ask the Ito family to pay back the money Evangeline spent. Consider it her dowry. And you, Sterling, stop dreaming about leaping through the dragon's gate. Come back with me obediently and be the Bai family's live-in son-in-law. As for the wedding, I'll handle it. I guarantee it'll be a grand spectacle." "Impossible!" Seraphina rejected it without a thought. Sterling cared about his pride the most. How could he ever show his face in their social circle again? "Sterling, ignore him. We can call the cops." Panic flashed in Seraphina's eyes. Of course, she knew how absurd Sterling's actions toward Evangeline had been over the years, but her subconscious still wanted to protect him. She knew that if Sterling was taken away, the rest of his life was officially ruined. Thaddeus kept nodding frantically beside her. Exactly, this is illegal detention. We can call the police. Dorian looked like he was listening to a hilarious joke. His gaze swept over the Ido family members, who were all huddling like scared quails. Of course, they knew Evangeline couldn't have children anymore. With Sterling's pathetic abilities, marrying into their family meant he couldn't stir up any trouble. At best, he'd be a decorative mascot in the villa. But if he didn't go, after a scandal like this, the Vance family definitely wouldn't marry him, and the Bai family wouldn't let it slide. The Ito family would probably never have a foothold in Kyoto again. Sterling looked at Serafina's slender back, taking a deep breath. As if he suddenly grew up, he let out a bitter laugh. Serafina, thank you for loving me all these years. Just one sentence, and Serafina understood his choice. Sterling? Sterling's gaze drifted to Evangeline, then back to Serafina. Since I was a kid, my family spoiled me. Even though I'm the guy, whenever I messed up, you were always the one standing in front of me. Thank you for tolerating me for so long, but I have responsibilities I need to bear now. I can't be a CEO. Actually, being a live-in son-in-law is pretty nice too. At least I can eat, drink, and have fun for the rest of my life. His voice was hoarse, asking carefully, Serafina, knowing I'm this rotten, will you look down on me? Serafina shook her head. Maybe because she wasn't the one who suffered the pain, or maybe because she grew up in a greenhouse. Everyone makes mistakes. As long as you know you're wrong and can change, it's fine. Nobody noticed when the crowd dispersed. That night, the engagement banquet meant for the Ito and Vance families hastily swapped out the bride's name. But none of this seemed to cause a single ripple in Serafina's heart. Father Vance felt terrible seeing his daughter like this. Last time Sterling left, Lysander was her salvation. What was she supposed to do this time? Of course, his worries had absolutely nothing to do with Lysander, who was currently oceans away. At ZS Academy in London, I walked out of the classroom with my backpack. Callahan had finally managed to visit and had been waiting impatiently. While eating, we started chatting, and somehow the topic shifted to the drama back home. My expression was flat. I wasn't really interested. Callahan slammed the table. I flew all the way here, and this is the attitude you give me? What else should I do? The Ido and Vance families were major players. A scandal like that spread through the entire city by the next morning. Knowing the gossip myself was less surprising than the event itself. I smiled. Callahan slapped his thigh. You have no idea how satisfying it was to hear that. Thank God you broke up with her. Serafina, too. She had such an amazing guy, but insisted on tangling with someone else's boyfriend, causing the other girl to get multiple abortions. That's what you call karmic retribution. I didn't care about any of that. I just found it funny that after not seeing him for a while, this guy actually started believing in karma. But Callahan seemed to remember something, raising an eyebrow. You know all the big news clearly, so do you know how Serafina is doing now? I frowned. I actually didn't know. Ever since you left, Serafina's been completely devastated. Then the Sterling incident happened, and her reputation in our circle went totally down the drain. Even though Father Vance wants an alliance, nobody is willing to marry her. I mean, who wants to wear a bright green cuckold hat so openly? Anyway, be careful. Father Vance isn't looking at family backgrounds when picking a son-in-law anymore. Everyone knew Father Vance had delayed my engagement to Serafina precisely because of my lack of background. So this turn of events was the ultimate punchline for us. Only, Callahan frowned slightly. The last time I saw her, I felt like she was mentally unstable. Hearing this, the hand holding my spoon paused. Both Sterling and Serafina practically took a royal flush and played it into the absolute garbage bin. It wasn't until I left that they both realized how precious it was to have someone who loved them with everything they had. Sterling ended up as the Bai family's pathetic mascot son-in-law. Serafina completely ignored the numerous blind dates her father set up, pouring all her obsession into the music studio. In the past, whenever there was an issue, I was always the first to rush in and fix it. Now, facing problems she couldn't decide on, she remembered my absolute dedication time and time again. Add to that Thaddeus constantly sighing and commenting around her intentionally or otherwise, Serafina felt increasingly guilty toward me. As the studio's problems piled up and she couldn't find proper solutions, she became so extreme she literally locked the doors, trapping herself inside and refusing to go anywhere. Father Vance even called me once, trying to persuade me to return. He even tried using his connections abroad to pressure me, but I was no longer that 18-year-old boy who could be threatened. I simply abandoned the academy Father Vance had picked and applied for a degree in another country entirely. Knowing she couldn't find me, Serafina's actions became more and more erratic, throwing tantrums constantly. It was then that Father Vance finally started paying attention to Thaddeus, while Serafina was dangerously close to being abandoned by the family. The little princess raised in a greenhouse was teetering on the edge of the abyss. Looking at the pasta on my plate, I instantly lost my appetite. Honestly, a long time ago, I genuinely had feelings for Serafina. I even warned her to be careful of the Vance family dynamics. Back then, Serafina just looked at me with disgust, calling me a vulgar, calculating schemer. She hurled all the filthy insults in the dictionary right at my face. For her sake, I never brought it up again, but secretly investigated Thaddeus myself. He wasn't the useless trash he pretended to be. Back then, with me guarding Seraphina, Thaddeus couldn't make a move. That was exactly why he targeted me at every turn. You reap what you sow. When is a wealthy family ever truly peaceful? I couldn't help but wonder, did Serapha finally remember my value, or did she actually love me? Thankfully, I didn't care anymore. After finishing the meal and chatting for a long time, I dropped Callahan back at his hotel and walked home alone. Next to my rented house stood a couple chatting, my landlords. As soon as I stopped, they told me the news. A new tenant had moved into the courtyard. Hearing a door open, a head poked out from the next unit. It was a girl about my age. The usually noisy courtyard instantly fell silent, simply because this girl was undeniably gorgeous. I looked up, zoning out for a second myself. "Hi, I'm new here." The girl smiled, her eyes curving like crescents as she reached out her hand. "They said a Chinese guy lives here. I guess that's you." It had been a long time since I heard such standard Mandarin. I nodded slightly, then slipped into my room. Jumping from arts to finance was a massive leap. Despite my natural talent, the pressure was immense. Every day I buried myself in books. This was probably the first time Alara got ignored. She ran back to her room, then knocked on my door holding a plate of pastries. "We're neighbors from now on. Please take care of me." I looked at the pastries, then scanned her from head to toe. Having spent years fawning over Seraphina, this was the very first time a girl smiled at me so carefully and sweetly. I kept a cold face, but still let Alara into my room. Alara was 2 years younger than me and shared the same major. It was her original field of study, so seeing my desk full of notes, she generously offered to tutor me. Our relationship gradually thawed, and we became each other's only friend in this foreign land. Once we got close, I learned that Alara had suffered a lot to chase her dreams. She said she grew up in an orphanage. Even though she was later adopted by a wealthy family, there was always an empty spot in her heart. No one understood that feeling better than I did. We talked for a long time. I placed a plate of washed fruit in front of her, saying flatly, "Let's hang out more. Consider us friends." Alara picked up a lychee and nodded heavily. "But you still haven't told me about yourself." Hearing this, my eyes grew distant. Even though it was all in the past, I still didn't know how to talk about it. Before 18, I was so poor I walked with my head down everywhere. After 18, I became Seraphina's premium simp. I had money, but I was still the existence everyone looked down upon. Seeing my furrowed brow and silence, Alara realized she misspoke. She playfully stuck her tongue out and said, "It's late, I'm going to sleep. Gotta report to school tomorrow." They say when you do what you love, time flies. I smiled at Alara as she ran toward me hugging a sunflower. "Congratulations! You graduated!" Over the years I studied while working. Until the very end, only Alara had been by my side. Looking at this increasingly mature girl, my eyes teared up. Tonight was my last night. After saying goodbye to classmates, Alara dragged me to the rooftop for round 2 of drinks. Knowing her for 2 years, this was the first time I fully opened my heart and talked about my past. Alara just sat beside me, looking at the city lights below, quietly listening. After a long time, she sighed and hugged me tightly. "It's all in the past. I'll walk the rest of the road with you." She knew Lysander was cautious and sensitive, constantly hiding his spikes to let her mess around beside him, but she also knew he wanted to be himself, a hawk soaring in the sky. The next day, as I grabbed my suitcase to head back to our home country, I saw Alara standing in front of me with her own luggage, smiling brightly. "I just really missed the spicy and sour noodles outside the school gate, so I guess I'll force myself to tag along with you." I didn't burst Alara's tsundere bubble. This was my first true entrepreneurial venture, so I handled everything hands-on. This trip back was for work, and to visit the bros I hadn't seen in ages. Thinking about how the Vance family pressured Callahan for years trying to find me, and how he suffered just so I could live in peace, I felt incredibly guilty. Callahan was ecstatic, knowing his brother finished his degree abroad and actually achieved his dream. As we chatted, he glanced at Alara, who was happily eating next to us, and couldn't resist dropping the bomb. "Over the past few years, Seraphina still comes looking for me every few days to ask about you." Hearing that name after so long, I actually felt a moment of daze. I glanced at Alara, then shifted my gaze back to Callahan. Who doesn't have a past? Anyway, I'm just hoping to drink at your wedding soon. After dinner with Callahan, we headed back to the Winslow family villa. Because time was tight, I originally planned to stay in a hotel, but Alara said she missed her adoptive parents and dragged me straight home. Seeing us, Mrs. Winslow hurriedly ushered us to sit down, asking if we were exhausted from running around all day. Mr. Winslow was in the medical equipment business, but he kept up with domestic news and had plenty to chat about with me. Tomorrow, my company was negotiating with investors. Even knowing his future son-in-law was extremely capable, he still repeatedly reminded me of what to watch out for. It wasn't until late into the night that we returned to our rooms to rest. At the Vance family. Early in the morning, Seraphina changed into a beige women's suit, prepped by Father Vance. She looked as sharp as a high-powered CEO, but when she turned and saw the photo of Lysander on her nightstand, she still froze for a second. 4 years, she had no idea what kind of man he had grown into. Her fingertips traced the photo as a bitter smile formed. It wasn't until Lysander left that she realized, despite holding the title of his girlfriend, she didn't have a single proper photo with him. No wonder everyone used to mock Lysander for being her simp. This only photo of him was incredibly youthful, taken accidentally during a high school graduation group shot. Some things you only realize are tragedies after you miss them. When Lysander first left, Serafina just felt unused to the lifestyle change. She thought maybe if she gritted her teeth or if the maids were more careful she'd get over it. But gradually she realized that wasn't it at all. Her attitude toward Lysander had changed a long time ago. From fond to liking, from liking to dependence, and finally to an absolute necessity. She admitted it. She couldn't live without Lysander. The door opened from the outside. A maid walked in respectfully, informing her the car was ready. Perhaps because she was so utterly depressed after the breakup, she spent massive amounts of time searching for Lysander, digging up everything about him. During his last days, Lysander spent all his time studying finance. She learned from her father that if it weren't for her, Lysander probably would never have touched the arts. He might have been a titan of the financial world. Later, due to funding issues with the Vance family, she could no longer be the carefree princess drowning in love and ignoring business. To ease the financial strain and to understand Lysander more, she started stepping into his field. She actually learned quite a lot from it. Meanwhile, the Winslow family's driver was already waiting outside. As soon as I got in the car, the driver handed me the guest list for today's summit. When my eyes scanned past the name, Vance Corporation, I paused slightly. What's wrong? If you don't want to see her, I can attend alone. Alara noticed my hesitation and quickly offered. It's nothing. Just didn't expect a fairy-like girl who never fought for anything to actually dive into this money-stained business. But the Kyoto circle was small. Running into her was within my expectations. Besides, our transaction was already settled. Upon arriving at the venue, we followed the staff's guidance inside. Over this period, thanks to the assistant's files and Mr. Winslow's briefings, I had a good grasp of who was who around us. The deeper we went, the more serious the atmosphere became. Every table was engaged in intense discussions, until my eyes landed on an empty table. There was nothing on it but a name card. Serafina Vance. After being together for so long, nobody knew better than me how passionately Serafina loved her violin. The girl I used to protect so carefully had finally grown up and become a realist. While I was spaced out, a familiar voice called out, Lysander. I clenched my fists, not turning around, but a wave of warmth hit my back as I was hugged tightly from behind. In a flash, the entire world went dead silent. Serafina's arms tightened as if trying to crush me into her bones so we'd never be separated again. Lysander, you're finally back. Do you know how long I've waited for you? Her voice was literally trembling. Just as I was about to push her away, a figure darted out. In the next second, Serafina was violently shoved to the floor. What the hell are you doing? Alara stared at Serafina on the ground, her eyes full of absolute hostility. The Vance family is supposed to be high society. I didn't expect Miss Vance to be the type to throw herself at someone else's boyfriend in broad daylight. They were all in Kyoto. The circle was small. How could Alara not have heard the rumors about Lysander and this woman? Usually she could handle it. But seeing Serafina in the flesh, the image of Lysander groveling and sacrificing his dignity for her flashed in Alara's mind. She was furious. She would never let Lysander suffer that kind of humiliation again. Serafina's mouth hung open slightly, stunned for a long time. She scrambled to explain, but I just stood there and said flatly, let's go. The meeting is starting. Whatever it is, we'll talk later. Nobody knew better than Alara how much I valued this seminar. Seeing Serafina trying to follow, Alara immediately blocked her path. After the seminar ended, I walked out to find Serafina waiting at the entrance. Our group silently agreed to head to the cafe next door. Alara sat across from me, glaring sharply at Serafina. Why are you still harassing Lysander when you clearly broke up years ago? Seeing Alara defend Lysander so righteously and naturally, Serafina's heart twisted violently. She subconsciously tried to dodge the reality of their relationship. In front of Lysander, she had never been at such a loss. She wanted an explanation from him. She wanted to say she was wrong. She wanted to tell him that for all these years, she missed him desperately. Yet despite having a million words caught in her throat, she ended up just red-eyed calling his name Lysander. But my eyes only showed pure impatience. I checked my watch. If Miss Vance has no other business, I'll be taking my leave. Why? Finally seeing him again, Serafina was terrified I'd leave. She shot up, grabbing my wrist tightly. Why are you leaving? I looked at her calmly. The contract is fulfilled, and Miss Vance found her true love. Of course I'm leaving. I don't believe your father never told you that our relationship was nothing but a transaction. So that's the reason? That's why. No matter how I treated you all those years, you always stayed exactly the same. Serafina stared at me dead in the eyes, desperately seeking a denial. But reality was cruel. My expression remained flat. I looked at Serafina. Your father came to me back then, asking me to help you out of that mess. Over the years, not only did you successfully get into a top university, but you also had a 24/7 dedicated simp. Aren't you the one who won? Truth be told, Serafina was my first love. But luckily I was rational. I always knew I wasn't worthy of such a high-born lady. I constantly reminded myself it was just a contract. But what teenage boy doesn't fall in love? I dragged the contract out year after year, all the way until Sterling returned, and I couldn't fake it anymore. But when Serafina asked, her voice trembling, if I had ever loved her, I shook my head. Never. I'm not a masochist. Why would I fall for someone who mentally bullied me 24/7? Serafina, I never loved you. When those words left my mouth, Serafina's face turned deathly pale, but I didn't care at all. I just wanted to go back and share the news of our successful partnership with my company colleagues. Serafina clung to my hand, refusing to let go, but Alara stepped between us, forcing Serafina to watch helplessly as my car vanished from her sight. The seminar didn't get derailed by this little accident. To celebrate our successful trip and loosen up our high-strung nerves, I decided to take everyone out for team building. At the campsite, while everyone was having a blast, a man in a suit called out to the staff, delivering a massive haul of food and drinks. "Mr. G, this is from Miss Vance. She wishes you a wonderful time. Please sign here." I glanced at the receipt the man handed over, frowning slightly. "Please tell Miss Vance that whatever we want here we'll order ourselves. The person who needs her constant care is Sterling." Seeing the boss reject the waiter's delivery, everyone looked over curiously. Under the scrutiny of so many eyes, the suit guy stood there awkwardly. But I already hauled it all here. I didn't say a word. The guy had no choice but to pack it up and leave. But this didn't deter Serafina at all. On the contrary, she grew even more motivated. Every day she racked her brains, guessing what I needed. My company was thriving. Contracts flew in one after another. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I personally went to Serafina's office and told her to stop doing such idiotic things. "Why? I like you, so I want to give you everything I have. Is that a crime?" I stared at her for a long time. After all our years together, this was the first time I realized Serafina could be so insanely persistent. "But I don't like you. Your constant barging into my life is just a nuisance." "Serafina, enough. You never liked me in the first place. I left clean and simple. You and Sterling can live happily ever after. Isn't that what you wanted?" Hearing this, Serafina's heart was entirely hollowed out. She shook her head helplessly. "It's not like that. How could I not like you? Me and Sterling?" Her voice shook, her eyes red as she stepped forward, grabbing my hand, frantically trying to explain. "We were just friends. We grew up together, so my subconscious instinct was to take care of him. But the person I truly love is you. Besides, he's gone now. I just want to be with you and go back to how things were." "How things were?" I laughed bitterly. The 18-year-old me guarded her like a dog. No matter how she treated me, I always went back. Whenever my heart fluttered for her, it was violently crushed by her and her friends' arrogant orders. She treated me as a backup plan. Now she was talking about going back to how things were. Truly hilarious. I shook off her hand, my voice as cold as ice. "Serafina, we don't have a how things were. That was a transaction. Now, the transaction is just over." "Impossible!" Serafina refused to believe it. "What kind of transaction would make someone risk their life?" She kept shaking her head. From the day I entered the Vance household at 18, spending every day with her, this was the first time I had ever seen this proud princess begging so pathetically. "You're just mad because I stopped spoiling you like I used to. Serafina, you need to grow up. Learn the difference between love and habit. The way you spoiled Sterling, practically groveling in the dirt, that wasn't a lie. Don't bother me again." After saying that, I dropped the file folder in my hand, turned, and walked away. Right at the door, I stopped and added one last thing. "I'm getting married. Let's end this peacefully." With that, without giving Serafina another glance, I walked out and shut the office door. I thought the whole mess ended right there. I never expected Thaddeus to actually come looking for me. I didn't think Thaddeus and Serafina had any deep sibling bond anyway. Logically, since they were both Vance children and Serafina didn't want to inherit the business, Thaddeus was the best option. But Father Vance never gave him the time of day, even though Serafina hated being tied down. Not that any of this had anything to do with me. Back then, Father Vance gave me a sum of money, and I fulfilled his wish. The debt was settled. As for the Vance family's dark secrets, I had zero interest in knowing. But Thaddeus actually showed up at my company. Alara was a bit worried. Thaddeus looked like a useless playboy on the surface, but he was actually deeply calculating. Him showing up right now definitely meant trouble. I looked at the woman in front of me, frowning and full of anxiety, and a smile curled on my lips. Ever since Alara was adopted, her parents had exposed her to the cutthroat business world. Of course, she wouldn't naively think Thaddeus was here to play matchmaker for Serafina. Though I did get the money, it was at the cost of sacrificing my own original future. So technically, nobody owed anybody. Sure enough, just as Alara suspected, Thaddeus wasn't here to plead for his sister. But when I heard his proposal, I was visibly stunned. "So what makes you think I'd help you?" I didn't even look up, just casually spinning the pen in my hand. "You say you don't like Serafina. Others might buy it, but I don't. If you agree to help me, I will definitely convince the old man to approve of your marriage to her." The absolute confidence in Thaddeus's tone was completely undisguised. Years ago, yes, because of Father Vance, I never dared to actually cross the line with Serafina. Even when I was dying of jealousy, I could only watch from the sidelines, stuck between moving forward and retreating. But he miscalculated. The current me had absolutely zero interest. Facing the only female companion I had, I got used to being tolerant and pampering. My 18-year-old self mistook that tolerance for love. It wasn't until I met Alara that I realized love isn't bottomless tolerance, it's mutual respect. Everyone said Serafina was depressed and miserable after I left. But nobody ever stopped to think that everything she was facing now was entirely caused by her own indecisiveness. And now she wanted me to foot the bill? I tied myself to the Vance family for cash, suffered endless humiliation, and never dared to have any inappropriate thoughts. Honestly, using the title of future son-in-law of the Vance family to pave my own way was entirely possible. Yet, I chose to leave everything I built over 5 years behind. Now that our debts were cleared, Thaddeus actually wanted to use that old tactic to control me? Fucking hilarious. Seeing the confident, highly competent Lysander before him, Thaddeus felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Excited that he might be able to control a weapon like Lysander, but terrified that Lysander would flip on him and become uncontrollable. Hearing Thaddeus's pitch, I had nothing left to say. I just pulled a document out of my drawer. This is the contract I signed with your father back then. I'm grateful for his help, but I also sacrificed 5 years of my youth to give him exactly what he wanted. I believe Father Vance hasn't come looking for me because he knows our transaction is fully settled. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers together rhythmically. As for this love you speak of, after 5 years apart, it faded a long time ago. Sorry, can't help you. After delivering that line, I didn't spare Thaddeus another glance, buzzing my assistant to show the guest out. He was stunned. Since childhood, even though his father ignored him, he had never suffered this kind of humiliation. But realizing that Lysander was no longer the man he used to be, and having the Winslow family backing him up, he had no choice but to swallow his rage. After Thaddeus had been gone for a while, Alara finally dared to speak. She wanted to say it but couldn't quite get the words out. I just smiled, eyes full of warmth. Looks like we need to move the wedding up. I wonder if Miss Winslow is willing to marry me. Alara looked at the ring suddenly appearing at my fingertips, her mouth slightly open, completely blanking out for a solid minute. Weren't we talking about Thaddeus's evil plot? Why is he suddenly proposing? I chuckled. This was something I prepared ages ago. Thaddeus used his sister as bait, wanting me to go back, team up with him, and be the Vance family's loyal lapdog again just so he could secure his throne. Too bad he calculated 1,000 times and missed one crucial fact. I let go of Serafina a long time ago. Thaddeus. Alara just couldn't wrap her head around it. In wealthy families like the Vances, it was impossible to just abandon the only male heir. There had to be a reason why Thaddeus was so utterly ignored. How much could he really help Lysander? I glanced at Alara and gently cleared up the mystery for her. Serafina and Thaddeus looked absolutely nothing alike. Outsiders just assumed they were fraternal twins. But after doing my own digging, I knew that wasn't the case. Thaddeus was the son of a maid. Back then, his mother took advantage of her position and sneaked into Father Vance's room while he was dead drunk. That incident dealt a massive blow to Serafina's mother, cracking their originally perfect marriage. That woman was instantly fired. But by the time she showed up at the Vance estate again, Thaddeus was already born. No matter what, he had Vance blood. Even though they hated that woman with a burning passion, they kept the child. Because the two kids were similar in age, they announced to the public that Serafina's mother had twins. But growing up, although Thaddeus never lacked food or money, he was never acknowledged. The Vance family empire would never be handed to him. So that's how it is, Alara gasped. Suddenly, everything made perfect sense. Just as everyone was deep in thought, the door burst open again. I looked up and right in my line of sight was a frantically desperate Serafina. Lysander, are you okay? Seeing him, her suspended heart finally dropped, replaced by pure relief. I smiled mockingly. Thaddeus wanted to team up with me, offered to send me back to your side, to keep being your Vance family's pet dog like a decade ago. Hearing this, Serafina's face drained of color. The contract her father showed her flashed in her mind. For 5 years, Lysander had to drop everything and strictly orbit around her. If they were a normal couple, any guy would have probably snapped from her princess tantrums and bailed long ago. But Lysander endured that humiliation for 5 entire years, and they all thought it was his natural duty. Serafina clenched her fists, her body trembling faintly. I'm sorry. She wanted to apologize, but I didn't give her the chance to utter a single syllable. I just nodded slightly toward Alara. Show Miss Vance out. Maybe she finally gave up, because for the next while, she didn't come to harass us anymore. This allowed the two of us, who were busy prepping for the wedding, to breathe a massive sigh of relief. Right up until before the wedding, I was discussing business at a cafe. Usually, I wouldn't need to be there personally, but as the Winslow family's future son-in-law, I brought the wedding invitations myself. The entire conversation was filled with laughter, until it was shattered by a jarringly hostile voice. Lysander! What the hell are you doing here? I turned my head and saw an absolutely furious Sterling. I instantly remembered the history between the Bai and Ito families. Looking at Dorian, my gaze turned knowing. Evangeline was a daughter of the Bai family. Even if she made a massive mistake, Dorian couldn't bear to see his sister suffer. But Sterling was a different story. Rumor had it that after the Bai family found out Evangeline couldn't have kids, the very day they dragged Sterling back, they forced him to get a vasectomy. Now the Ito family was angry, anxious, but completely powerless against them, desperately searching for doctors to reverse it. Who knows what kind of methods the Bai family used, but up until now, Sterling's body hadn't recovered an inch. Seeing him now, Sterling looked even more fragile and pathetic than before. He used to have some rationality, but the more he suffered, the more his hatred grew like crazy weeds. Through whatever twisted mental gymnastics he possessed, he actually blamed everything on me. He genuinely believed that if I hadn't spent 5 years saving Serafina, she would have remained 100% obsessed with him, and she would never have just stood by and watched him endure this torture. The waiter nearby suddenly gasped, eyes wide. Evangeline stormed out of a private room, marching straight towards Sterling. Slap, she delivered a brutal slap across his pale face, instantly turning it a vibrant red. I asked you to entertain the guests for a minute. You can't even do that, right? Useless trash. Saying that, she kicked him away in absolute disgust. Sterling couldn't brace himself and crashed backward. With a thunderous crash, the entire cafe echoed with the noise. But Evangeline couldn't care less. The cursing continued. Sterling sat slumped on the floor, his face flushed red, glaring at me with a mix of utter helplessness and pure hatred. I just politely shook Dorian's hand, getting ready to leave. This pathetic look perfectly mirrored how I used to guard Serafina. Ironically, I noticed Serafina supporting Father Vance at the entrance. Seeing my sarcastic smirk, Sterling immediately tried to turn and run. This was the great son-in-law Father Vance chose for himself. Dorian, you should keep your domestic dog on a tighter leash. Letting it run wild and bite people isn't okay. Honestly, I didn't hate Sterling. He was just the other option in Serafina's twisted little multiple-choice game. But I was no longer the Lysander, who had to swallow random unprovoked malice. As the whispers and judgments in the cafe grew louder, Sterling's face turned beet red as he yelled, "Lysander, this is all your fault. Why did you sign that contract with the Vance family? If you hadn't, Serafina and I would have been together a long time ago. Do you think I'd be stuck dealing with this crazy bitch and suffering like this?" I had no idea what specific tortures he endured, but watching his unnatural gait, I could guess a few things. My fault. I looked at the pathetic mess of a man, eyes full of mockery, who was the one who abused their wealth to suppress the Bai family and play with someone's feelings. You wanted both sides and you ended up with neither. Hearing me call him an idiot, Sterling was about to explode. He had been tortured at the Bai family for so long, and now he had to take my insults too. He was on the verge of completely losing his mind. Enough! Serafina suddenly lunged forward, standing between us, violently shoving Sterling to the ground. Behind Sterling was a towering stack of glass cups. The moment he hit them, crash! Shattered glass rained down everywhere. But the woman in front of him didn't care in the slightest. "Sterling, my feelings for you were never anything more than liking an older brother. It wasn't until I met Lysander that I understood what love actually is. So stop obsessing over whether we had a chance. Everything you're going through now, you brought upon yourself." She glanced at Evangeline, who was standing by watching the drama unfold. "I'm sorry, Miss Bai. Sorry for the trouble." Evangeline waved it off, completely unbothered. After that ultimate betrayal, Evangeline had absolutely zero love left for Sterling. She had money and power. Why on earth would she waste her heart on this piece of garbage? Every time she saw him groveling and kissing her boots, it literally made her sick. Serafina! Sterling's eyes widened, staring at Serafina in pure disbelief, then shifting his horrified gaze to Evangeline. "Xiao Li, send the son-in-law to the suburban villa to rest for a few days." Evangeline stared at him with pure disgust. "Don't let him out until he remembers who his actual masterstress." Others might not know what the suburban villa was, but how could Sterling not know? Hearing those words, he scrambled over in absolute terror, grabbing Evangeline's pant leg. "I'm sorry, honey, I was wrong." Xiao Li, the bodyguard, hesitated for a second, but seeing the murderous look in his boss's eyes, he kicked Sterling over. He immediately clamped a hand over Sterling's mouth and dragged him out the door. "Mr. G, sorry you had to see that. I will definitely be on time for your wedding tomorrow." Evangeline apologized sincerely. I just shook my head, turned, and said my goodbyes. Serafina took a step forward, licking her dry, cracked lips, and finally managed to squeeze out a sentence. "You're getting married." I nodded. This wasn't exactly a secret in our circle anymore. Serafina probably only found out now thanks to Father Vance's active efforts to hide it. Father Vance awkwardly turned his head to greet the other guests. After a long pause, Serafina snapped back, looking at me. "Are you doing okay?" Before I could answer, the black sedan outside honked its horn. I jogged out, and Alara perfectly met me halfway. We hugged tightly. Inside the cafe, Serafina's eyes turned bright red watching us. Father Vance just patted the back of her hand. "Let's go." Our wedding was an absolute spectacle. Almost half of Kyoto's elite high society was in attendance. Nobody could have predicted that the pathetic simp they used to mock and disgustedly reject would suddenly transform into an existence they all had to kiss up to. At the wedding, Serafina sat in the darkest, furthest corner of the banquet hall, watching our sweet interactions on stage. She downed glass after glass of wine. In a drunken daze, she stumbled step by step out the door. It seemed like only in her delusions could she still have a Lysander all to herself. Someone fell from the balcony. As the banquet reached its peak, a scream pierced from the garden. When the staff rushed over, they only found Serafina lying alone in a pool of blood. The floor wasn't high, but incredibly unfortunately, she landed right on a set of spiked garden fences. The metal branches tore through her flesh, impaling her calf entirely. The party continued indoors. Serafina had already been rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery, but because the rescue was delayed, even after resting for 2 months, her leg required steel pins. If you looked closely, you would notice Serafina now walked with a permanent limp, but none of that had anything to do with me anymore. After the wedding, I took Alara back to the States. It was the third day after Serafina's surgery. Fighting through the agonizing pain, she insisted on coming to send us off. It was the same driveway as back then, the same violin. She held the most important thing in her life, offering it to me with both hands. When Sterling left, you were there. What about when you leave? If you knew you were going to leave eventually, why did you even show up? The song ended. A light drizzle began to fall from the sky. Happy wedding. She watched our intertwined fingers, a bitter taste flooding her mouth, and offered her blessing. If I hadn't gotten tangled up with Sterling, would we still have a chance? Because she only found out later that my contract with her father was only for 2 years. The rest of the time I spent by her side was entirely of my own free will. Clearly, I truly wanted to protect her. Thinking of this, Serafina's throat felt like it was stuffed with a sponge. She looked at me with desperately hopeful eyes. How could there be no love? But I didn't want to answer these hypothetical questions anymore. I just tightened my grip on Alara's hand and looked at her. It's time. Let's go in Lysander. Serafina was unwilling to accept it, screaming at the top of her lungs. But no matter what, our footsteps didn't pause for a single second. There aren't that many what-ifs in this world. We walked through the boarding gate, stepping forward without looking back. Just like 10 years ago, the plane traced a white line across the sky. Only this time, there was no one left to risk their life diving into traffic to pick up her dropped